we're fortunate to have him in a role that we could shift him and make some adjustments in his workload, but also have him fill that position. Also, so with an interim, he can decide if this is a position that suits him as well. So I think it's a good opportunity for all involved. So those are the highlights of what's happened in the last couple of weeks, and wanted to share all of those with you as we prepare for the school year. With only a couple of weeks to go, again, I'd encourage you to join me on August 29th out at Crescent Valley, and continue to stay engaged as we begin the school year. It's going to be, I'm really optimistic and looking forward to it.
Does anyone have questions for Ryan?
This is back to the sports piece thing. That's super exciting. I'm like super excited about that. Yeah. Is there a way to get like some numbers if that's increased the number of students from like lower income or homeless or housing insecure students, if we have that data? Not necessarily to say who they are, of course, but like if that's increased participation. Okay.
Yeah, that's something we can track this year as we go through the seasons. And again, recognizing that middle school, this will be the second year. So last year was the first year for soccer and basketball for both boys and girls. And so we will have the same we'll still have the same sports, so we'll be able to do a pretty good comparison that way, as well as at the high school. So yeah, I think that will be important information for us to have.
Thanks, Ryan.
I share the same appreciation on the last point, and question about it. Can we sustain it through the general fund, or are we getting any special monies right now that we need to be concerned about in the future?
I think, so right now we're going to be using SFA, some student success act dollars to cover the cost. It is something that we'll continue to track over time. I think overall, the state budget outlook is a bit concerning. At the same time, we're in a spot right now where we've been really thinking about this since 16, 17. So this has been 5 years in the making, and so feel pretty solid in our ability to continue that into the future.
I have a question. I was trying to get used to this. So I had a question. I saw, I don't know, a few days ago, an email to parents about low-cost physicals for sports participation. So I was just wondering if we have no-cost physicals available. Is that...
What our enrollment looks like. It's the first year, so students may not be as aware of it, but do we have a lot of students signing up to participate?
So we are still in the process of students picking up their schedules, which I often think of as a first draft. And there are also often requests that come from that. So we'll give that information to you in the future. What I'll say is that there's a class for beginners as well as a class for students who have more experience with the language. And so there will be multiple opportunities in that regard. And also with it starting up at the middle school as well, I think that the numbers will increase over time. Adding a language is oftentimes a challenge, and shifting away from a language that's been in place for a long period of time is a greater challenge. So I would say that we're going to watch it. We're going to continue to support it. We have a 4-year agreement with the Qatar Foundation because they are covering part of the cost early on, and then that percentage goes away over a 4-year period of time. So we'll be able to have the support we need to see progress before making any sort of final decision on it. But for now, we're excited to highlight it. The only other school in Oregon that I'm aware of that has Arabic is Lincoln High School in Portland Public, and we had a team that went and visited Lincoln in the spring to talk about their program and how it had developed over time. So again, it's exciting, and we'll continue to watch it.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is public comments, but I do not believe we have any public comment this evening. So we will move on to our next item, which is our bond program update.
Good evening, and Dale is not here today. I'm going to be covering for him, and we do not have a PowerPoint. We just had our report in the packet, so are there any questions?
I had one question. Oh, just wondering about feasibility of opportunities for board members to be able to see some of the progress in person. Will there be, I don't know, with school in session as well, if that will be as feasible. But I've always enjoyed getting to go and see kind of the work in progress, so.
I'm sure we could schedule something. I can work on that and get something pushed out to everyone.
The easiest thing to do would be to contact Kim if you're interested in a tour, Kim Nelson, and then we could coordinate time for that. That's probably the easiest way to handle that. Kim Patton has a great deal on her plate right now, getting us closer and closer to August 31st when everybody wants to be in their classrooms. And so I think Nelson is the best person to help coordinate that.
So I have a couple questions. Well, question and then kind of a question that really leads into some comments for the board. The first question is I know that you're stressed about this, but are we going to be able to open all our buildings on time considering all the work that's happening right now?
Good question, Vince.
I'm sorry, I put you on the
Yeah,
spot.
so as of today, we anticipate being in on time at all of our schools. Of course, I can't predict the future.
Right.
But right now, everybody is on track. We're going to start moving things in the week of the 22nd, and for some of those schools, we won't have anything moved in until the week of the 29th. Several of our elementary schools have scheduled off-site time for training and professional development, but we anticipate having all of our schools with teachers in the classrooms by the evening of the 31st.
Great, that's great news. I'm yielding back because just to see if anybody else has a question. Then my next question is, I'm trying to remember, I was going, which of our buildings are not going to be seismically retrofitted at the end of the bond project? And I know that Dixie's one of them, and I know the district office, and I was just wondering, what are the other ones?
Well, from the day we open a building, there are new seismic regulations that come through. But Dixie, district office, the food service warehouse, and the two-story portion of Harding.
Harding, right.
Really is all that will be left. Everything else will be seismically up to date from 2000 and probably, I would say 2004 and newer.
So this leads me to my comments for the board. You know, as we're coming to the end of this bond project, I was really astonished to look in the report. It was like 73% spent out. I was like, my goodness, we're in the twilight, you know, part of this project. The board's attention needs to return to long-range facilities planning. One of my regrets of this bond project is that we did not allocate any resources into our district office. I am not satisfied with the state of the district office and the condition in which our district professionals have to work. I was just a few weeks ago, I was meeting, I think we were doing negotiations. Anyway, we were at the district office and I ended up chatting with, you know, our food service administrators, and they're working in what is essentially a large closet. There are no windows. And I think it's a poor example. It reflects poorly on us. And I think that we should have higher expectations for the facilities that our professionals work in. And so I'm asking the board, looking forward as we do our facilities planning, one, we shouldn't ask our district professionals to work in a building that isn't seismically safe, and that should be conducive to their important and creative work. And so it's time to do long-range facilities planning again. And I yield back.
Vince and Therese asked my questions, so I think we're all very appreciative to just, you know, as Vince said, watching those numbers tick up for your percentage spent and percentage completed and all these things is, wow, we're getting to the end. So good luck for the next couple weeks. And thank you for getting this all done. So, moving along, the next item on our agenda is the summer program update with Joe Lycum, Sabrina Witt, and Sean Bernard.
Thank you. Don't lean in. Oh, that's so counterintuitive. I'm supposed to start, aren't I?
Yes.
Okay. Good to know. Okay, thank you. Welcome. I don't know if you've seen this yet. Was it submitted with the packet? No. Nobody's seen it. Great. We're going to talk about summer programs. This is our second year doing a pretty significant lift in the summer. And I think the place that made sense to me to start is to think about how summer programs are aligned with your goals and vision for the school district. I think it's critical from the start, as we start to think about this whole different idea, is to say, not surprisingly, that we're back to say, hey, let's think about things totally different than we ever have before, and it's going to be great. And that turned out to be true. It has been great, and I think it's important to think about things different than we have before. Historically, summer programs were a very small Band-Aid applied in summers. Really good examples of that are things like high school credit recovery programs, right? Where kids missed out on an opportunity during the school year and then were given a chance in the summer to try to fill a gap. And I think we have taken this opportunity that COVID has presented us to really reevaluate what does summer mean when we think about our relationship to students and families. In that way, I am super grateful for what COVID has offered us, because in some ways, I don't know if we would have gotten here as quickly if we hadn't had that, and it brought us to a place where we've had some pretty serious conversations about what is our responsibility as a school district in connecting with students and families in that time frame between June and September. I think some of that has been supported by your support of some pretty significant programs like Family Advocates and Mental Health and Wellness, because those are programs that are always needed to be offered. And I think that's something that as a community we're pretty comfortable with, right? Which is people need therapy all year. They don't just go for 9 months of the year and then take a break. People need support with housing, electricity, food, all of those resources doesn't fade out in the summer because we decide that that's when we take our break. And so I think that's a norm that we're all used to. But we've been able to use that as a launching to talk about what does that actually mean beyond that? What is the role that schools play in staying connected to students and families for the whole year? And how do we do that in a way that's meaningful? What I think is important is that when I pulled up the board goals and I looked at them, I thought it's amazing to me how summer programs actually fits in every single one of these. Sometimes we do things because it's focused in one area, and I comfortably could look at that and think, oh, we actually care about all of these things. This aligns with all of the work that the board is interested in. I think it's important before we do anything else to talk about what that meant, which is that we were able to hire over 160 staff to work in our summer programs. That is phenomenal. I think it's amazing how many people were eager to jump in and be a participant in this activity. We talked at length last school year about how exhausted and depleting the work has been during COVID. People have put in exponentially more than they may have ever in their careers, and they're tired for all of the right reasons. And when it came time to hire, we hired over 160 people to support our programs. It's probably worth noting what that means to our HR department, but Joe will talk about that a little bit later on. What's good to know about that is that when we think about 160 staff, what kinds of roles they played. First and foremost, we were able to hire site leads of staff that work in our buildings to then really hold the work in specific buildings. So, for example, we hired 2 SPED teachers who ran sites. We hired a counselor, a PE teacher, another SPED teacher, and another classroom teacher. And they worked like building principals. Hundreds of kids and staff in their buildings, running activities, building schedules, doing all of the things that we do in a school year, they pulled off in these elementary schools this year, in the summer, and at the high school and at the middle school, as well as at Wings. So an amazing group of staff that stepped up and really took on huge loads of responsibility. We hired classroom teachers and EAs. We had family advocates working, behavior staff, mental health staff. We had special education teachers and school counselors. We had incredible people who stepped up to work in the programs this summer. It was an amazing outpouring. You'll see them as well as all of the amazing facilities staff and food and nutrition staff who worked this summer, and they're all sporting amazing tie-dye shirts. So you can find them in a crowd, which is pretty outstanding. It's a pretty amazing thing. I think it's also really good to highlight how much background support it requires. When I think about the people in facilities and technology and food and nutrition who hold this work so that the rest of us could be in buildings doing this, it was pretty phenomenal.
So taking a look at the instructional buildings that we had, we wanted to just highlight a little bit about each different program that we had. The first one we want to highlight is Garfield Elementary housed our kindergarten academy. Through the work of that team, they identified a variety of students, I think about 20 of them, that they invited by utilizing some criteria about students who have never been to school or been a part of a preschool experience. We focused on students that were bilingual and trilingual so that we can give some exposure to them. And then we also prioritized our students with special education needs to invite them into our program. And so that was recently held at Garfield Elementary. One of the other highlights that was really exciting there was we also had some student volunteers that also engaged with some of the staff members that were there. And seeing the interactions of those volunteers as well as the students was just raising our hearts. At the elementary level, we had two different sites. We had Lincoln as well as Bessie Coleman. Both of them were very similar by nature, but they had a few different tweaks that happened during that time. For our Lincoln location, we focused on literacy, which is the big driving force of how we identified students that were joining us. We pulled a list of students that had low scores, and then we looked at the multiple intersections to see that they would be a good candidate to join into this program. We looked at English as well as our Spanish when we were evaluating their ability to join us. We also focused on bringing students that needed it because of the IEP recovery services. The state identified that through COVID that our students with disabilities were disadvantaged during a lot of the virtual learning and said we need to take a closer look to see how can we support the loss or the potential unfinished learning to an extent that their peers did not experience that. So those students attended. We also had extended school year. So our students that based off their IEP, the team has identified, we need to provide some schooling during those break times, also participated at Lincoln. All of those were all infused in all of the different classes. So there was a lot of inclusion in that approach. The other thing that was really unique for Lincoln and which was quite nice is through partnership with the foundation, they funded La Yoga Es Vida, which were two different staff members that came in and provided almost like an elective or a special for the students to participate so that they can be rooted in that mindfulness and deep breathing. And that was a really great partnership. At our next school, Bessie Coleman, once again, we utilized that literacy focus. For these schools that we're funneling into there, they were our English only. We also identified our IEP recovery services. We also identified extended school year. And our students that are supported at Catherine Jones Harrison in our life skills program were also brought to that school. Through that, we had inclusionary life skills. So we had the amount of classrooms that they had, and every student was in those classes, which I think is a great feat and a good work that this team was doing. One of the highlights that comes to mind through that is we had a teacher who walked over to the special education staff member and said, "Hey, I have 3 students that have mobility needs. I think I'm prepared for them. I've never had them before. Come and join me through this process to make sure that I'm ready to receive them and they have access to all of the classroom." And so that brings that joy piece that we talk about is everyone is really rising together, and there's a little bit of vulnerability of saying, I'm learning something new and I'm ready for it.
I think one of the pieces about this that stands out to me too is, and we talked a little bit about this last year, is that by having the elementary schools come together into a building, there are students that normally would not be interacting with each other that are all now mixed together in classes. And I think that's just inherently good and valuable, particularly when we think about inclusion. But I would say almost more so is the staff. We had staff working in these buildings who normally do not interact with each other. They don't necessarily see each other, that built these incredible teams of support. And I think Bessie Coleman is a great example. We had students at Bessie Coleman that were from Mountain View, Catherine Jones Harrison, Letitia Carson, and Bessie Coleman. The staff were predominantly staff from those buildings as well, with a handful of staff that were new to us. And that meant there was a lot of, oh, that student is someone I work with. Let me tell you a couple of things that really work with that kid. And a new staff picking those things up, learning new skills, learning new strategies, and making a new friend and a colleague. And it has done an amazing connection between buildings that often don't intersect at all. And I think that dynamic is, as Sean says all year, is magical. He says it. Summer programs is magical, and it kind of is. And that's a great example of that.
At the middle school level, we took a look at the students that we identified as needing language, arts, and math needs, and taking a good look at the intersections once again. And we identified those students as well as students that needed some additional support with the transition, going from class to class, wrapping a concept up, going on to the next class, as well as organizational skills. And so those were a bunch of students that we identified there. Once again, we took a look at the IEP recovery services, as well as extended school year needs, and we have them all housed at Linus Pauling, where they are engaged in class. We've broken it into period 1, which is either a literacy or math focus. They have an elective that was provided by the teachers there. We have nature walks. We have where they infuse taking a look at different features in the community. We have a strategy board game opportunity. We have a Spanish introduction where students self-selected so that they can really enjoy the educational experience during summer. And then their third period is the opposite of either the math or the literacy focus. Also through this, we had our life skills at the middle school, once again, infused in all of those classes so that they were getting the exposure for them as well as for our students that typically may not interact with them. At the high school level, we had a few different opportunities for it. The one that is the largest was our credit recovery. And so the focus with that was on our math credits, language arts credits, social studies credits, science, as well as health is in there. So students that were not on track for graduation, they were invited, they were able to show up on the first day and get enrolled into the different classes. We had an AM session for them to take one class for 0.5 credits, and we had a PM session, same thing, so that they could receive 0.5 credits. During that time, it was a nice, relaxed atmosphere in regards to we took over the whole first floor of CHS. So you can see a photo in this presentation that this is the library where we started out the day where there are some drinks for them to engage, and then they could go to their classes, and then at lunchtime once again they were able to connect with each other and then go to their second session.
We will need to burn this photo of the eating and drinking in the library though, so after this presentation it will like disintegrate into the air.
Aside from that, as we have our life skills, so with that, that was actually a separate program in regards to towards the end of the school year. They had 2 weeks, and actually right before this school year, they're going to come back a little early so that they can reintroduce themselves back into that learning experience. We also provided some enrichment opportunities for students through Lynn Benton Community College, and that was a partnership where we worked with our family advocates to identify students that may not have had opportunities throughout their household experience to engage with LBCC, and there were a great opportunity of week-long and 2-week-long camps for it. So that was another opportunity at the high school level. And then finally, our WINGS opportunity. WINGS is our program for students with disabilities between the ages of 18 through 21. And so these are students that are really focusing on the what next after public school. And so there was another opportunity for them to engage in the community engagement and work experience. One of the highlights that one of the staff members was sharing is they actually went to the Benton County Fair, and the opportunities of choices that students were able to make that they may not have had in their family dynamic of being out in that community and how much joy came from that. There was also the opportunity to continue their work experience as well.
So, okay. Is this working? Okay. Everybody's had trouble so far. So, so our family advocacy and mental health program, as Sabrina had stated earlier, is a program you all know needs to continue all through the year. And actually, our family advocacy program is really the longest standing summer program I've been a part of here, because over the last 2 summers, starting in the midst of COVID, this was the process that we ran as a district to support food and resources for families in need across the entire community. The groundwork laid by that really taught us that there were families that we were reaching out to over the last 2 summers that may not be connected to a family advocate who are saying, whoa, 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 time out. During the year, I need help as well. And it really helped us during the school year understand the scope of need that we hadn't seen before. So again, really thinking about summer as an opportunity to grow our normal school year, it really built a better understanding of where are their needs in our very income unequal community. So our program continued to run all of our family advocates. Almost all of them continued to operate just as normal. The same folks working with the same families, building the same trusting relationships all through the summer. Our mental health team also did the same. This is the second year we've been able to maintain continuous operations, and nearly all of our mental health clinicians were able to work the entire summer, and we built really strong relationships with families. It did require everyone to move around a little bit, so we saw kids at different places, which actually let many youth see different buildings they had not been exposed to. A few of our clinicians worked at Bessie Coleman, and one of them was from our middle school. Some of those students had never been to Bessie Coleman, so they got to experience one of our beautiful new schools.
One of the pieces about that feels super important to call out is our transportation department, which does a tremendously huge lift to make this happen, including providing transportation for kids to access mental health. And that is a huge thing to think about. If kids are normally accessing their mental health during the school year, then they're in the building, and so is their mental health therapist. But generally, we've left that up to families to monitor in the summer. If we think about families accessing those services outside of school, the fact that the transportation department was able to do this tremendous lift with the program at large, including the transportation of kids to access their services, is a significant barrier removed to ensure that families and kids are staying connected.
In addition to that, we also provided funding for community partners to provide childcare. That's including our ongoing relationship with the Boys and Girls Club, as well as Parks and Rec, and OSU's Kid Spirit program. So we were able to fund some of the families from our family advocacy outreach caseloads to be able to access childcare in addition to Boost, which let us have circumstances with families where a mom who's a single parent with several kids needs to be able to continue to work, and we can not only provide them half a day of Boost throughout most of the summer, but we can also provide childcare, and our transportation program was able to do the transport back and forth to these sites, so we were able to provide some smooth continuity for families. As we mentioned a little bit earlier, we're also going to have another community health fair. This will be our second annual opportunity, and I really have to really put a plug in for Samaritan Health Services, Casa Latinos Unidos, and the Benton County Infrastructure. Those partners have stepped up massively. Our partners at Samaritan Health Services will be offering a free vaccine fair for all pediatric vaccines, all of them. This is a frankly unprecedented activity. And there are people, when we attempted to do this last year at the state, who told us it could not be done. And I think that it is a testament to their commitment to our working relationship that they have stepped in to do this. The health navigation team, who not only includes our school health navigators, but also the health navigators who serve wide varieties of our community, including the migrant population in Benton County, have done amazing outreach work, and will many of them be volunteering to work at this activity. We are going to have an incredibly high level of translation support because we're really working with Casa Latinos to invite in our Latinx community and provide cultural activities, including Casa Latinos Unidos is going to throw a football tournament in Garfield Park on the day of the event. So it'll be a big party. We'll also continue to provide Operation School Bell measurements, hearing and vision screens, and Benton County's Lincoln Health Center will be closing down part of their operations to provide sports physicals. We have a partnership with them to ensure that no families will have to pay for those, and they're offered all day. We've been working with our athletic directors to make sure that we're outreaching to kids, especially middle schoolers, who will still need to get those for middle school sports. So it's really important to underscore that not only did we hire 160 educational professionals to work in our buildings, but we have hundreds of staff who continued to work their regular jobs all summer, except now they had to also run school. And that is nothing short of amazing. I want to recognize Kim Patton for the work that the facilities department did, including things like completely adjusting the schedule about how the custodians clean buildings in the summer. We had custodians rearranging so they cleaned parts of buildings, opened other parts, and let us continue to teach kids all the way through. We adjusted bond construction programs to finalize pieces of buildings, all so we could teach kids, and the facilities department did it with their absolutely yes, how do we make it happen attitude. The same can be said for our food service team, who, when they heard we were going to be serving kids in buildings, said absolutely, how do we do it? When they heard there were barriers to serving at certain buildings, they figured it out. I think that overall, every part of our background team, the unsung heroes of the district, stepped up huge. I want to underscore this with our human resources department. We were hiring staff right about the time that everybody gets hired. Right in the spring, after you all approve the budget and we go out and hire everyone for the next year, we said, hey, let's hire 160 extra people. And Jennifer Duvall said, okay, let's figure it out. And we were able to figure it out, and I want to impress upon you that in conversations that we have had with other districts where we're hearing what people are doing, no one is talking about this. No one is talking about the impact on district infrastructure when we are effectively running a new semester of school in the summer. And that has implications for you all in your thinking about the budget, and I think it has implications for our entire district leadership team when we're thinking about the structure of how we support these folks, these 260 folks who work all year and are really happy that they also got summer champion t-shirts.
It's true. This is why I have them. So I think the piece that feels super important is that as we talk about what's in the future of this, that we talk about what our commitment and ownership is of these kinds of programs. If I were like playing sad, sappy music, I could, it's not my character, but I could, and I would say things like, how can you take the puppy away once you give the kid the puppy? But the reality is it's a meaningful question to talk about what do our students and families need. And we did, and we showed up and we did that. And at this point, the state isn't sure that this is a sustainable vision that they have. I think it's super critical to have this conversation. I actually think it's also critical that when somebody says to me, well, why aren't we just doing year-round school, that I want to pause and talk about, because our vision includes the prioritization of marginalized communities. And year-round school doesn't necessarily prioritize marginalized communities. And that is our goal. So whether or not that's the angle the state takes or what people do, it's important to me that here in Corvallis, we're talking about what do our marginalized students and families need? And what does that mean for how we think about our role for 12 months out of the year? And I think it's an important conversation to have, and to Joe's point, it's an important conversation for the board to have and the state to have. And what I know is it's kind of magical. And when I think about the engagement of students, the relationship building, there's a great story that comes actually from last summer, but sticks with me, of a student at Corvallis High School who had previously been at Corvallis High School and moved to College Hill and was having a fabulous experience at College Hill and was participating in credit recovery. But after participating in summer programs, said to Matt McDonough, our amazing school counselor at Corvallis High School, If I'd had this kind of connection, I don't think I'd ever thought about going somewhere else. And now that I've been here, I feel so connected to this space and to these people, and I feel differently about school. And I think that's exactly what we see in students. It's also oddly energizing for staff. And I think that that's a beautiful and great thing. And when I think about what the future is, I think the foundation plays a critical role, and they are very interested in being a part of that, but it's bigger than that. And it becomes something that we have to decide as a collective, what's our commitment to this? I know where Ryan stands on that, and I know that Ryan is having also important conversations with other people about that, because this isn't just about Corvallis. It's much broader than that, and it's an exciting and interesting topic, and it's doing an amazing job. I can't emphasize enough how incredible it is to drive around to the different sites and think about the over 1,000 students and families that were impacted by summer programs. That's an incredible thing to think about when we think about what that looks like. That's 1/6 of our student population. That seems about right when we think about our data. That's all. Questions? Yes, Sammy has a question.
I'm going to ask my question first. So I have to admit that this was one of those presentations that got me a little teary, because it is magical. It's like this is amazing work that everyone involved has done. And as I think about what you've done, like, only knowing we had funding for this kind of at the last minute, and I think about like talking to lawmakers and saying, like, this is what we can do for these kids. How much more could we do if we knew ahead of time, if we knew this was a permanent piece of funding from the state directed towards summer programs? It makes me, what more could we do? How many more kids could we reach? What kind of programming could we develop? You probably don't have an answer to that right off the top of your head, but.
Oh, no, we have answers to that.
Okay, well, I'd love to know the answer, because I'd love to be able to tell people that.
Yeah, no, I think that what I would want to do in honor of Lee Santee, who is hired as our data and assessment and something amazingness, is that it only would allow us more of an opportunity to continue to look at our data and think about who is continually being marginalized in our community, and how do we even better reach them and serve them and connect with them. I think the time piece, it becomes huge, because when we don't know what we can do until spring, we're hiring 160 plus people when we're trying to prepare for the next school year. We're also trying to ask building principals in our sweetest but most directive voices for all of their enrollment information, and have you called all those families, and have you done these things? I think more time and predictable patterns allow for sustainable, predictable systems, which would allow us to more accurately identify who needs help, and do that in a way where families feel really confident about what will be offered and when. Imagine being a parent in February knowing already this is what's in place for summer, which as a parent, as a single parent of kids, like not deciding the week of is a beautiful thing, right? And so thinking about how that becomes a predictable and sustainable part of our system is a service to families, as well as the educators who are trying to move the programs forward.
I would also add that one of the improvements I think that we were able to achieve this year over last year is the continuous process of improvement and iteration. We were able to take an incredible amount of feedback about our program last year and apply it directly this year in simple things: increased communication, centralized record keeping, a focus on data and achievement, all kinds of elements that will allow us to have better data walking out of this process, so when we sit down and review it as a team, we can understand more specifically where did we catch students that we needed to catch, and where did we miss folks? How do we reach out and include them and pull them into the fold so that they can also have a benefit? So again, each time we do this, we can sharpen our capacity to do it better the next time.
Well, I want to
Just thank you. Really, this is a phenomenal work. And I'll pick up on the last thing you mentioned about in an ideal world where we would have a full year school. That's not ideal. What I'm seeing here is much better because we're investing in the needs of the community and schools and students. We're providing an opportunity to innovate and to invest in equitable solutions to systemic problems. And that's phenomenal. That's much better. And I'm really amazed. I would like to see you present to the House and Senate committees and Legislative Policy Committee at our OSBA and be able to share your story. It's phenomenal. It ought to be sustained and continued. And on that note, I do have few thoughts that I was thinking of. The first one is, how much is that costing us per student or for the 1,000 students? Do you have a ballpark that you can share?
Yeah, we're going to have better data in a little bit once we are able to pull that together. So we had 2 separate grants totaling about, I'm going to ballpark this figure, so.
Sorry, Olivia.
Yeah, Olivia, you can text me really angry stuff in a minute. About $1.4 million, and that required additional match at about a 25% rate from the district as well. So we are looking into how much of that we were to spend. So one thing that we know to be very clear, and Ryan made clear to us as we were developing this program, is the state is certainly looking at this project and seeing what are school districts doing. Last year, many school districts didn't spend the money that was apportioned to them. They were unable to develop those programs or find community partners to connect with. Our goal has always been to hold this work here, to hold it close, and to do it with a high level of integrity. Last year, when we had a few other community partners that shifted this year, we leaned in with them and worked to build their capacity to serve all kids. That was tremendous. It's built some great opportunities in the community, and that's still our mission that we're going to continue with. Our goal is to spend as much of that money as possible to really represent we need to give the money that was entrusted to us back to the community through the services that we provide. That is part of why we're able to fund a whole diversity of services that you heard from Sean, Sabrina, and I tonight. Everything from Kinder Academy through health fairs. Our goal is to make sure that we provide a wide palette of services to plug holes and gaps in the community.
Ryan, did you? You may not, but I wondered if you had any thoughts on the budget. I know we talked about that some. The 1.4 is correct. Actually, that was pretty good. I pulled it right out.
I just think about it in terms of what we spend on an annual basis in our budget, and that is a small percentage of what we receive on an annual basis. And so in terms of bang for your buck, it feels really like you get a lot for it, and we're able to provide really specific, really address specific needs in a way that just enhances everything that happens throughout the year.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. And on the other side of the coin, the output and the outcome, I don't think we can measure it right away. There are so many longitudinal results and impacts that I would love to see down the road, and I'm sure we will see it down the road. Few things I'm going to just talk about it, and maybe one day we could look at the data, which is the summer drop. How is the impact of the summer school and the summer drop? Inequities in terms of access to the summer school based on socioeconomics or race or disability. And speaking of IEP recovery services, how much recovery are we making to recover the credits lost, whether it is because COVID or because of lack of IEP services? And really the big question is, what else do we need to present to the legislator in terms of narrative, stories, or data that could convince them to say, let's do this, let's continue this?
I think one of the pieces, I think there's some good data here, and I think you're right, some of it will be delayed, and some of this we can provide in a month, right, when we're done. We still have a couple weeks left, but some of this is data that could be easily provided. If I think about the narrative, one of the pieces that feels important to me is there's just a lot of historic myth around access and participation. So I think about the easy one is you'll never have staff, people won't apply. And that draws me to when I think about the hiring for our mental health and wellness program, right? It was kind of like, okay, good luck, but you'll never find anyone. And to this day, we continue to find enormous amounts of incredibly qualified staff, many of which are staff of color, many of which are staff who are maybe bi or trilingual, many of which are staff that are bi or tricultural, right? Like, that is a myth, and it's a myth that tends to be an easy one to hold so that we don't have to engage in the next level of conversation. I also see that come up when we talk about students and families. Families won't follow through. Kids don't want to be in school. They're not going to come. They're not going to participate. And none of that proves to be true over and over and over again. And I think that that is particularly true when we have bad habits and how we talk about families who are marginalized. The things that we say about families in poverty or families of color that are really, really overcharacterized and terrible things. But it also kind of puts this barrier in place so that we don't have to push past it and solve this problem. And I think the narrative becomes, that's not what we're seeing. Students are coming. At the high school, students were walking themselves to school, walking in the door and saying, I need a class. I don't even know what it is, but I know that I need one. Wow. Please help me find it. Parents are making sure that we have, that they're there and they're coming. They're calling and saying, I'm so sorry I missed this. How do we get there? What happened, right? No, the barrier is not people not wanting to be involved or not wanting to work or not wanting to come. And I think that's a narrative to carry forward because that's the thing I hear really often, and that's not true at all. And then if we could wipe that away, we could actually have a pretty meaningful conversation about how do we actually just want to hold this work.
Phenomenal. Thank you.
I would add one other piece, which is just specific to mental health. So mental health services for individuals that have transportation barriers or limited access to healthcare services are pretty notorious. No-show rates are a big deal. They're a thing that's talked about everywhere. And one thing I was talking about with one of my team members earlier this week is we had a student who was receiving services with their therapist, and their parent actually had forgotten to tell them about an appointment. And they were furious. They were furious, so upset with their parent that they had forgotten it. And they said, when is it? And they put it on their own calendar, and they rode their own bike to therapy. And so I just want to say that even from education, even into healthcare where we talk about access and we talk about people not showing up in impacted environments and low-income environments and communities of color, that's not true. It's not true because when you build real relationships, when we have teachers concerned about how can these mobility impacted students access every part of my room, when we have site leads getting haircuts from their students to help them feel connected.
True story.
True story. Multiple staff.
At the high school.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, it wasn't an elementary student.
We'll figure out how to turn it into an elective next year. When we have teachers at our middle school constructing their own electives based on their own interests, their own passions, they build strong relationships with kids, and relationships are what make learning work.
I definitely have comments. I want to take us back about 6 months, not even 6 months. This board received a report from this team and the Public Schools Foundation, and they were looking at what this summer program was going to be like. And I remember the deer in the headlights look you gave. You were like, oh, we're going to do the summer program. We're not sure what it's going to look like, and it's going to be great, but we're not sure. And wow, just wow. I mean, really think about that. In just a few short months, you built an astonishing transformational program. And I'm delighted, but I'm not surprised because this district has consistently over time been changing the education system. It started, we led the state in adopting, all-day kinder and pre-K classrooms. We were doing deep equity work before it was cool. We are the only state that has embedded mental health clinics. And now you're diving into all year-round school. So I'm not really surprised. Halfway through your talk, I was already thinking about sustainability and what was the role of the board in this space. I think I only have one request, and it's really dovetailing off of what Sammy shared, is that we need to have a clear idea of what the return on investment is. What is going to be the impact? And I think you're going to see it. I mean, as these kids come back to school in the school year, we're going to see the impact of this programming. Probably in the first 3 months, we'll see some change, some deflection. That's going to be really, really important because this board has work to do. We have to be strong advocates for this. Our role here is to protect this work that's happening. We have to prioritize it in our strategic planning. We have to set up tracking to make sure that we're holding the system accountable to our expectations, but to allow us to celebrate that. But we definitely have to raise our voices in Salem. And we're going to need your help in telling that story. I mean, what you shared with us tonight, I have a whole raft of talking points here. So I already feel pretty confident in talking to folks about this, but we'll need more detail. But we're kind of on the knife's edge here in this year, and we can't let this work fall away. So thank you so much for your hard work over the summer. Thank you to all the people. And you know what? I'm a little upset that we're sitting here in this lovely facility and there's not one person from the public. I hope people will tune in on YouTube and watch this video so that they can hear your report and the amazing work that's happened. So bravo, thank you.
Sean's doing math over here while we're...
Yeah, so we just wrapped up our high school program, and we were actually connecting so that we could do transcripts for our teams. And preliminarily, we have 128 credits that were given out this summer, given that a student could only receive a maximum of 1. So they could have participated in a half credit in the morning and a half credit in the afternoon. And so 128 given out.
Awesome. I mostly they already asked all my questions, like data and support and that kind of stuff. So I was just going to share, as a parent who has experienced the summer program 2 years in a row at different levels, to see the growth this year has been so tremendous. Not that last year was bad, because it was great too, and for my elementary age child, but for my high school age student this year, she was excited to go and got on the bus, and I was like, do you want me to give you rides? And she's like, no, I'm going to take my own way there. And so she was really excited, and to see her want to go to school in the summer was really amazing, because usually that was not expected from me, from a student going into junior year. But I think it's because you all have sort of started to normalize the conversation about summer school, right? And the way that you're talking about reframing how it's talked about, because it's been talked about students did something wrong, they're super behind, and the deficit language, I've seen you all shift that, and I really wanted to highlight and appreciate how that whole framing has changed on how you're talking about the summer program with families, and I think it's awesome. The one thing I was wondering about is if you're collecting testimonials from students and from even family members to add into the number data, because I think those together are really important, especially if we're trying to get larger support and longer support, because it's really worth the investment. And so if you have those together, it creates a whole story, if that makes sense. And so I was wondering about that part.
I love that. I bet Kelly would love that too. I'm sure she loves that. I think one of the pieces there that I appreciate is the idea of normalizing. And I think that in the end has the biggest impact. Normalizing that people need things all year, normalizing that people come and go and have different needs and can get them met in different ways. The more you talk about it, the more it's a part of what you do, the more it's not a thing. And I think that's true about mental health, it's true about housing resources, it's true about, I'm just gonna make up this credit, and that's actually not a big deal. And frankly, I get good coffee and bagels and lunch and all of that because Matt McDonough gets it and he knows what high school kids need. So it's all of that becomes a part of your culture and your community and just what you do. And the more it's just what you do, the less it has stigma. I think that's huge.
Can I add one more thing about the food thing? That was a source of excitement. So I just wanted to say to Matt, that was great. Whatever magic he pulled, it was always, I always heard about what the food was. So I think that just is awesome that that was provided for the students too.
I think one thing about that, because it's been 2 years in a row, and we've mentioned Matt McDonough's name a couple times. He's one of the counselors at CHS who's been the site lead both times, and it's pretty amazing to watch him work in the summer. He just sort of comes alive, playing lo-fi beats in the library and doing all kinds of things. And I do remember when Ryan got back right at summer programs, one of the first questions you asked me was, did Matt get all the food he needed? And something that is a little bit passé, people say all the time, you know, if you have food, high schoolers will show up, but it's actually really powerful. And I think that an overabundance of food, because we've seen this in different kinds of ways, right? Where there's an overabundance of food, it's beneficial for kids that don't have very much. They don't have to feel like it's limited. They don't have to make a special trip for themselves. They just do it. We had the opportunity on the last day of summer programs to actually serve lunch to the students. Sabrina and I jumped in, which was probably the most fun thing we did all day.
Hands down, all summer, most fun.
And as we were getting finished, you know, there wasn't going to be any more. We didn't want to have leftovers, so we started sending food home with families, and one student came through and he said, can I get a plate for my mom? And we were like, go! And then he came back through for his dad and for his siblings, and he took home a bag full of food for his family. So again, that was totally normal. Just did this right in the middle of this entire activity. So food is a really powerful cultural connector. It brings us to the table, it's where we share conversation, and it's something that kids really want. And I know that our food service and nutrition program is really working very hard. We got to see them do some amazing work this summer as well in terms of shifting our food to really get kids engaged. So I'm excited to look forward not only to this, but to all the other things that our food service program is going to provide.
So two things came to mind when you talked about the normalizing of summer school. And through conversation, we initiate it as summer school for students, and that is overwhelming for them. And we've identified it's actually 1/4 summer school. That actually is only 1/4 of the total amount of time, and yet they still can make those connections and still earn those grades. So I think that that's a good power of that normalizing. The other thing that you talked about is in regards to collecting some data, some students' information. At our middle school level, one of the focuses that we wanted to take a look at was the students' self-identification of how they feel towards school, how they feel towards math, and how they feel towards language arts. And so that'll actually be something that we have concrete data to present to you of if there's been any changes, or the students that are actually engaging in that, where they feel they are at. So we will have that.
Can we add a checkbox in Youth Truth? Have you attended summer school?
Oh, that's really cool.
It's something we have to look into, because it's a national survey, so I don't know that we'd be able to make an individual marker on that, and it's confidential, so I'd have
Anonymous.
It's good. No.
Yeah.
That's something that we will spend some time looking into. It's a confidential survey, so I don't know that we would be able to pull our own data, and because it's a survey that's used across the country, I'm not sure if they would be willing to add that, but it's worth having that conversation with the team there. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that how much I appreciate that your work demonstrates a challenge to that narrative that you were talking about I think it really demonstrates that when you remove obstacles that don't need to be there in the first place, that people are quite perfectly happy to make use of services that will benefit them, and they actually know what they need and they know that will benefit them, and then they'll do it. And so the real issue is, why do we have so many barriers? And I love that with transportation and childcare and cost, like, we're just, all this evening, we're just talking about knocking down barriers. What we're talking about is opening up opportunities and letting people decide. And if you want to decide that summer school is not going to be your thing, okay, but make it as a decision, not because you couldn't get there, not because you had to work, because you needed to provide meals, whatever. Let it be a choice, right? Honestly, I think what we see is that 1,000 kids are going to come, 128 high school credits have been earned. That tells me that if you make it available, people will do it if they think it will be good for them. So, I don't know. I mean, for the folks that might watch this or hear this later, this is what we want our school district to do. So show up and share your support for this. If your family participated, give the feedback to the district. We need that information, because that shouldn't just be Corvallis kids that get to do this, right? And the whole state should have a choice. The whole country should have a choice. But we're a long way from that, except right here, where apparently we seem to be onto something. So thank you so much for all of your effort toward that. It's really remarkable to hear the whole meeting. Like, what a great first meeting back from summer to all these things we're getting to hear. This is incredible work, and we're just doing some really powerful stuff. And I'm sitting at this table. You guys are doing some really powerful stuff, and I'm sitting here listening to it and trying not to think about bagels. But, which I realize now, where's Matt, and why don't we have them here right now? Board members get hungry too.
That's a board member. Kim does a great job too.
Okay, well, no, but right now, I'm talking right now. Anyway, so that's it. I don't really have a question. I just more of just a, wow. And so let's keep going, and maybe next year, and not maybe, next year we're going to hear even more amazing things. So thank you.
Well, and following up on what Therese just said about, like, if you participated and you had a really good experience, to let the district know, I would like to see the district keep track of who the students are that might be willing to go talk to lawmakers.
Yes, please.
There are definitely some. Because I think they need to hear. So, and parents, if you're a parent who benefited from having your kid participate in this program, they need to hear. So, yeah.
It's okay.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm just really glad that we had the opportunity for you to come and share all the hard work that's happened this summer, and to recognize folks that have been part of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Well, as Therese said, that just hearing about barriers being knocked down feels like what we're supposed to be doing. So next item on the agenda is the board norms. So this is an item that we review every year that highlights how we expect the board to work together. So does anyone have any, we don't need to vote on this, it's just an item for discussion and to bring this back up again and recognize we have standards that we live up to. So Ryan, do you have comments?
Yeah, this is, again, something that you're all accustomed to doing, because for none of you is this your first opportunity to weigh in on these board norms or working agreements. However, I think it's a practice that we want to continue to do annually. In the past, we've brought it forward sort of like we've done with policy, one time for any additions or revisions, and then a second time for action. And so my thought was that we could work our way down by letter through the, starting again with the norms and then moving to the working agreements and taking feedback as we go. Some years we have a lot of interest in making modifications. Other years, not as much. But it's an important process to go through. And also recognizing that we'll continue to spend time this year with our board goals. So those aren't coming to you tonight, because we'll spend time in our retreat working on those, and then we'll be involving our community in providing input and feedback on those as we move through the year, with the hope of a readoption or modification in the spring.
Okay, with that, then, why don't we start with item A on the board norms. Does anyone have any comments or revisions that they think we should look at under A, which is focused use of meeting time?
I have kind of I don't know if there's what there is to do with it, but in the first point number 1, where it says start on time and use time wisely, I'm just realizing that wisely is just not a very useful word for what that means. And so I'm wondering if there's what do we mean by wisely? And is there maybe a more clear way we could state? Are we suggesting that the amount of time we allocate should be proportionate to the importance or the timeliness of the topic, or what do we mean by wisely?
I don't think we've ever given.
Well, I have a process suggestion, and as I reviewed these, and I definitely support this rhythmic process of going over and renewing our norms. It is important. These are a reflection of our expectations for ourselves and what we want to focus on. But as I was reviewing both of these documents, I was really struck how I still see a lot of old language that was in these norms when I was first elected. This is a different school board. And I would suggest that, we can go through and affirm these and read through these. I think that's important. But I think that in the process of doing our planning, I think it's important that this board look at these in a little more critical way and capture all the good of this board. This is a very effective board. And then remove the things that are old and antiquated that we don't need, and that we've achieved. There is language here that could be let go. I'd love to see these documents become more compact and more nimble. So I think that there's more work that this board can do, capturing what's good about this board and carrying that forward, because we have elections coming next spring. It's very probable there will be some significant change in the composition of the board. So how can we create continuity going forward in the next iteration of this board? So I just would say, let's not wordsmith this document. Let's just review it and then come back to it over this year as we reflect on the important priorities, that we're going to be talking about over this year, and just kind of roll this in. Because if this board starts wordsmithing this, we will burn the midnight oil.
Which would not be a good use of our time, right? For the board norms.
Would that be wise?
I just wanted to appreciate what Vince shared about the way that it has been the same for who knows how long. And I know we changed a little bit of it to help with that, but maybe we can review it and also come back to it after we do the board goals, because then it can kind of feed off each other and say how do we support the goals with the norms a little bit better so they match a little bit, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, that is what I remember we talked about last year, was when we sort of did a little bit of wordsmithing on this. We talked about the fact that we were going to review the goals, and that maybe we should review the goals and then rework this. Go ahead, Ryan. Am I remembering this incorrectly?
No, you're spot on. So I would make a proposal then. I would not encourage you to wait till we have adopted the board goals. I would encourage either the board leadership to spend time looking at this document and making revisions that they then bring forward for the full board to read and provide some feedback around as a general way to work through it. I worry that if we wait, that we will be in the spring, and that feels late to me to have this document in place in a way that allows for successful transition to a new board.
Yeah, actually, that follows along with what I was thinking, that either board leadership or if other board members had really strong desire to be part of working on this, I would certainly be open to not limiting it only to board leadership. But I think I agree that we don't want to get to the point where we're pushing up against at the end of the year board turnover before this gets done. So that being said, should we, I think we should ask Tina also, because they're not here, if Sean is leadership, so if Tina has strong feelings about participating, or if anyone else has strong feelings about participating, maybe let me know, and we can put together a group of 3 people, whether it's board leadership or a combination of board members, to work on this. And then the question then is, when do we want to have it back to present the revised norms and agreement?
Usually, typically we do it during the retreat, is that correct?
We can't vote on anything.
Next week, okay. Okay.
Yeah, typically we've done it in session. When we first established those 2 documents, it was working with OSBA. They came and did a presentation around board governance. Within those documents were some examples, and we pulled from those examples and made modifications. So it's always happened in this format, but I also, the conversation seems similar to what we talked about last year in terms of spending more in-depth time with it. And I think that in terms of just for the sake of time, this would be what I would recommend we do. And I would also say, ideally, we'd have this done and adopted by November. Again, I don't want to wait till spring and all the implications of that with election season. So I would rather have it done and in place and solidified.
Agreed.
Yeah. I'm just thinking. So maybe we have a board meeting on the 8th of September and the 29th of September. So yeah, I think it feels like we could get at least the board norms done by the 8th and bring that to the board by then. So we would need it done the week ahead of time. Do you think it seems fast? I guess it's fast because school's starting and everybody's going to be really busy. September kind of falls apart. So let's say the 29th of September, that by then we'll have the revised.
We'll want to do it twice.
Yeah. So that we'll bring it for the first time on the 29th and then vote on it in October, which is what we did last year. We adopted it in October.
Well, and I would suggest that we also have some prompt questions for board members. What is good that we want to keep? What's missing and what's not working in this? What does the board need to focus on? And then have whoever is going to be drafting this language incorporate that and then bring it back for consideration. I think September 29th still feels fast. And this is not staff work. This is strictly the board doing this work. So this is ourselves, and it is important, so.
With this document, with the board norms, but with the superintendent working agreements, that's a shared doc.
Right, and so we would need to get your input as well. So then we could develop prompt questions for Ryan as well. So what does he expect from the board? How can the board can improve our relations and cultivate our relationship with the superintendent?
So this is great, and this is, when I pointed out the one comment in the first sentence, it was merely to say that the whole document's riddled with language like this, and so I think we need a more comprehensive rewrite. So I'm glad that it seems like everyone pretty much is in agreement with that. I don't have any strong desire to be involved in, but I would absolutely love to read what the leadership team comes up with, or Tina, or whoever. I personally don't want to set aside time to do what I think needs to be done to this on the timeline that we're talking about needing it to be done, but I'd be happy to make suggestions of words that feel important to me, or more organizational structure. Like, what I don't see in this board, or I don't see in these board norms, is things like language to call out and resist things like systemic oppression. And I would think maybe we might want to hold ourselves to that standard, because I think it's something that we've demonstrated as a committed principle of this board. And so I don't see those kinds of things. I see a lot of very managing a large group of people to try to keep them moving in one direction. And I'm not saying that we can't ever wander. Certainly we can, but as a general rule, I think that these don't capture what I see as really the dynamic work that we are, at least unofficially, agreeing to in the way that we work together. And I think this document doesn't reflect who we are. So I guess that echoes Vince's point.
So that just got me into thinking about elements from courageous conversation, maybe to be included in the norms. Reflecting on a few of the meetings last year or the year before, we have informal definition of how we conduct ourselves, and scribing that and putting it into the updated norms seem to be very, very important, I believe. And I want to just agree with Ryan. If we can communicate that before the holiday season, that would be a good prompt for whoever wants to run for office, that they know this is the working agreements, that these are the norms that we're signing up for. In terms of process, I would suggest it's the chair's prerogative to choose somewhere between 1 and 3 individuals as a work group, whoever volunteers, and then you maybe by decree you choose them, and they announce over email, send us any feedback, and during the first meeting they would present their initial drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I think okay. I hold my button down because, so I think what I envision is going to happen then is I will check in. If anyone here would like to be part of that drafting team, please let me know. I will reach out to the board members who were not present and ask about their interest. It's really distracting to have a large picture of myself there. And then I will build the team. We will get the feedback we want, or we need from the other board members, and we will move forward with drafting new norms.
I'll volunteer for the committee.
Okay, so we've got
It's going to be a board committee, I'm sorry, Kim. Legally, I mean, I don't know that we can avoid it.
Work group, if you have less than, I just turned myself off.
Here, I just turned
It's I think it's a work group as long as it's less than 4. It is a committee.
I don't think so. I think it's a committee. It reports back to the board. We can double check it, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Sorry. It just means we have to notice the meetings. And because it's strictly board work, I don't think that we can say it's handed to the superintendent to come up with norms and then we work it around. I don't think we can do that.
Then the best way around it is to deputize one individual to receive all the comments. They would incorporate it, do their best judgment to incorporate all the comments.
That we could do. And it is what I do for a day job, so I would be willing to do that.
It's similar to our resolution process, or the resolution process.
Right.
Now,
Yeah, we don't mean these mics are going to be a thing.
You can just leave them on.
Yeah, now that we know we can leave the mics on all the time, it's way easier, right? If Sarah can treat herself. How does that work with the resolutions then?
so in the resolutions, as long as the board is not taking an official action creating a committee, any two or three board members can meet caucus and create a language and present it to the chair, who would put it in the agenda. And as soon as it is on the agenda, they don't deliberate with a fourth person. So until there's an outcome, as long as there have not been assigned by the board, I think it's totally kosher for members of an assembly to meet, as long as they're not meeting within a quorum.
So this is different because we're talking about it at a meeting?
As an agenda item on the.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I see. I
The
just
board
wanna
is
make sure-
directing-
Make sure it's really
We
clear for people the
decided
difference
to-
between those
Yes.
two things.
Yeah, so just to bring the point to clarification, hopefully, let's say anecdotally, if we end up members 1, 2, 3, Shauna, Tina, and Therese, they could actually meet and then next week present Sarah with Board Norms 2.0. That's totally okay because they're volunteering on their own merits to present a language. So that's really a gray area, but I would say, since
But-
we're discussing it,
Yeah,
probably it's better to have
we
one
can't
individual.
just discuss putting together a group to do it and then not make that a
So
committee.
Exactly.
Vince is doing it, is that what I heard?
I'll
Well,
wordsmith the draft and then solicit feedback, and then if,
I think I want to have some discussion about that process. Not that that doesn't make the most sense in terms of efficiency, but I think that the spirit of what we have talked about in terms of the process is more collaborative. I don't know that we'll get the best work and the most representative if we do it that way. Even if we did just talk ourselves accidentally into a corner of needing to have it as a meeting, I think that still is the best process.
Yeah.
It's not the most convenient process, but I think that we will get the best result, and I don't know, so I mean, does this mean that we're talking about having to schedule this as a meeting?
Correct.
And then, okay, so I think that what are the restrictions around when we can schedule? Can the three people that are going to meet pick the time that's going to work for them to do it, and then?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things we talked about was having input from all the board members about what, they think is missing and what needs to be brought forward or kept. So I think, at a minimum, that information needs to be collected from board members before we
yes,
draft.
I can create a poll and get that information. What would board members like as prompts to collect this information?
What board norms what board norms or practices that we are observing, but they are not reflected on this document, and you would like to reflect to put on the documents?
I'd like, I guess, a prompt to call out key concepts that we think are important, and then if there's specific directed language that we think might be at least worth considering.
Maybe something along the lines of, is there anything in the norms that, I don't want to make this too long of a question, so you can probably figure this out, Vince, but something along the lines of, does it feel like it's almost like silencing to you as a board member, or that you've seen used in that way with community? Something around those lines, because we're talking, try not to be oppressive.
I quickly wrote down, and this was totally not wordsmithing these questions to mean and, to be fully thought out, but I have, what is good, what is bad, what is missing, and what needs to be kept. So if there's anything in here that we think is especially important, let's not lose that in the process, but bring in the new things that are really norms that we have in practice that aren't part of our actual norms.
Any other suggestions on prompt questions? Great, then I'll go ahead and create a poll, and I'll distribute it to the board with some preamble.
Okay, so
And then if we want, and then we need to
And then we
decide
have
on
our
whether
team.
you can have a committee or,
Okay.
yeah, I'm fine with a
I
committee
kind
too.
of feel like the timeline makes it kind of hard for that, because knowing like school's going to start soon, some people that want to participate may be traveling, or I just feel like we have a short timeline, and then we have to do like a public notice. I don't think it's that we don't want to be transparent kind of thing. It's more logistically, like we have a month and, well, we have less than a month and a half, because we have to have it in the packet before that meeting, right?
So, Therese, to allay your concerns, if I compiled all the raw information and included that in the proposed document, would that, because I understand that, I'm the white male, and then I'm crafting this document, and there's some concerns about inclusion, I get it. So you can see if there was something that I missed that didn't get in there. I mean, that's not my goal. I want it to be the right document. And I get this wrong when I work with boards and draft these. I always get it wrong, and I always get feedback, and then we recalibrate. So would that be helpful to allay your concerns, so allow us to move quickly, yet ensure that we have a robust and inclusive process?
Yeah, I think probably concern is a stronger word than I would use for it. It was more of I think that the process that we initially described before we realized we were describing a public meeting is a great process, and I think it's the truest form to how we try to work with one another. I also think that something like board norms should not then consume the entire fall period for us. And so this is not a hill to die on for me. If we do not think that we have a streamlined way to do this that doesn't involve having one person centrally compile it, I'm not going to push back on that. If we have a way to do it that feels accessible, I think we should strive for that. I have recused myself, so I don't think I really have a lot of room to say or make demands on how we do something that I don't have time to do. So I'll leave it at that. And I have a lot of confidence, Vince, that you will be as true to, applying what we give you. It has nothing to do with whether I think you would do a great job. It was more that we had this process described and that sounded really great, and could we still do it? If we can't, we can't.
Yeah, I sort of have the same, like we were talking about a process and then it became something very different because of logistics.
I
think, here's what I'm thinking, that rather than having a committee that's going to come together and wordsmith this, because just that process with a group of people can be crazy, is that Vince wordsmiths, you draft a new draft, and maybe we have one meeting of a committee to look at that final draft, that you look at that draft together before it comes to the board. So there's one public meeting that happens after a draft has been written, so that it's not a team that's expecting to sit down and write a whole document, because that I can see taking more than one meeting. Does that sound like it's sort of this middle ground?
I think that it doesn't matter what we do. This board's going to wordsmith the final document.
Yeah.
And so I think that in the spirit of the wording I don't like of using our time wisely, we should limit the number of times that this has to pass through people's hands to get to the end goal if we can. If Vince is okay with taking on, and if everybody feels like they will be able to respond accordingly and give feedback on what he provides, that seems more accessible to me than public meetings. And for something that we already know, if there are only 3 of us, that document is changing in that meeting. It does not matter. So why not, let's just change it all together in the meeting if we need to.
When I get feedback from you guys, we're gonna do it. You've been in mural before. Remember when we worked with Krista Miles? So that's the way we're gonna do it. It'll go quick.
Okay.
So.
I'm fine with that.
Let's do that.
And we still have 2 readings.
Yeah, we still have 2 readings. We still, we'll have the draft to look at before that first meeting.
Okay. And then you and I can connect on the whole board superintendent piece, and we'll get the superintendent part in. Great. And then we saved you from public meetings. Yay.
I know, that's what I was worried about, is like trying to figure out a time where 3 people's schedules were gonna match up at this time of year, more than anything.
I think that's I'm going to go to the word wise. I think that's very judicious.
It shows
and
foresight.
responsible, and being honest about what people's lives need right now. And so, yeah, that's a good choice.
I did want to say thank you, Vince, for taking on the bulk of that work and gathering our thoughts, because I know that takes a lot of time, so thanks for doing that in advance.
It's a little labor intensive, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
As long as you think it's fun.
Yeah, cool. We're like,
Okay.
So,
So Vince will solicit input from all of us and provide us with a draft for the September 29th meeting. Does that make, okay. That's where we are. Okay. Moving right along. So we're going to skip over the board and superintendent working agreement because that's part of this whole process also, and go on to consolidated action. And as a reminder, the items under this portion of the agenda are for action. Does anyone have a question about anything in consolidated action or something I want to pull out to talk about? No. So we need to take a vote.
Madam Chair, I move to approve consolidated action.
I'll second the
It's been
motion.
a while since I've chaired a meeting. Yes, great, thank you. So it's been moved by Director Algebra and seconded by Director Adams that we vote to approve the items in consolidated action. Director Jones, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Whitebear?
aye.
Director Algebra?
Aye.
Director Adams?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Passes unanimously. And so the next item on our agenda is our consolidated information. The items on this portion of the agenda are for information only and for discussion. Does anyone have anything under consolidated action that you would like to pull out for discussion?
Information.
Yes, thank you. Consolidated information that you would like to pull out for discussion. No. So let's move on then to board member comments. Anyone have comments? Vince?
I just want to once again express my immense appreciation, and on behalf of the community, for our staff and for our leadership team for consistently being ahead of this board and just being innovative and creative in meeting the needs of children. That is not universally the case across the state. And so even among school districts in our size class, similarly resourced, we just are immensely gifted with astonishingly good staff. And so we're very lucky to be able to serve on this board and serve these wonderful professionals.
Trace?
I wanted to give a shout out to the Corvallis Schools Foundation and Lynn Benton Community College for their summer programming, for offering free summer camp programming for students in the Corvallis School District. My son was fortunate to attend. I saw many other kids from Corvallis there. And thinking about barriers, they even organized transportation. So how cool is that? Because if you haven't ever seen, Lynn Benton Community College's main campus is not exactly what I would call accessible, but with transportation out of Corvallis, a lot of kids were able to attend some really cool STEM camps, some sports related, a wide variety of things, and with folks that are growing professionals or are, faculty teaching college kids. And so it was a nice mix of people teaching. I specifically saw a lot of LBCC staff and faculty around making that happen, identifiable folks that I know from the community. So it's really cool, awesome to make that happen, and for getting a grant so that it could be funded for our kids. That's a fantastic aspect of accessibility. Also wanted to just say for folks who don't know that OSU Extension's 4-H program this week right now is doing their International Leadership Camp, which included an elementary school leadership and a middle school leadership program. And there are many kids from Corvallis School District that are attending, largely bilingual event. And so it was amazing to show up and have it's wonderful. 90 kids, I think, attended this week. And so many kids just excited to be with other folks, speaking Spanish, finding their cabins at sleepaway camp. Really cool stuff. Also, another grant made it possible for that activity to be provided at no charge. So some really big wins for our community this summer, providing some really awesome leadership and academic growth opportunities for our kids in our community. And it's just exciting to be, to be part of that. And I'm excited for summer to be winding down for a lot of reasons, but I have to say that it has been a really fun summer of enrichment that our community has provided for a lot of kids. So just exciting. If you haven't had a chance to check out those programs, pay attention because they'll be available again next summer. I don't know if they'll get scholarships to make them completely free, but they'll offer some amazing programming again. I'm seeing fingers crossed from our leadership back there. But these are programs that have, there's sliding fees for kids that do need assistance, and for families that can't afford to pay, it's worth the money. So, check them out if you didn't get to partake this year. It's been a really fun and exciting time, so.
Anyone else? Sammy?
Can I share that?
Yeah.
So, I'm going to go out of the norm, and I have something I wrote that I want to share as a comment, and I timed it for about 3 minutes. It's reflecting on the summer school and seeing everybody in this building right now in person. I wrote this around the time we started Lincoln School, this building that we're in. And consider for a moment imagining that you are looking at a castle from the Middle Ages, and you go back in time to when the last brick was laid on the last wall of that castle. Just imagine that for a second. Such buildings have exchanged hands from one generation to another, from one dynasty to another, overseeing strategic parts of land and water. And it reminds me of my Arabian professor of social studies and political studies. He once always used to say, that a society should always focus on raising every human to the best potential over raising buildings. And the proverb rhymes beautifully in Arabic. بناء الإنسان أولى من بناء العمران. Reflecting on the castles of the European Middle Ages, one could see how such simple statement, بناء الإنسان أولى من بناء العمران, provides a framework for determining how to build a prosperous society, prioritizing people. The monarchs who controlled the castles possessed power and controlled their regions. Noblemen had exclusive rights by law to hunt in the nearby forests for meat, and those violating such imposed laws were subject to capital punishment if they attempted to hunt for meat near castles such as the one in Passau, Germany. Those who seized control over the fortresses gained advantage over everyone else. Inequities were exacerbated in food access, social and economic mobility around many of such buildings. Now let's go to today. Castles no longer have the traditional functions they once used to have. But one cannot deny that inequities in today's world are vast, and there are still walls that divide us. Not these walls. One fundamentally different thing in these walls is the ability of today's public schools to provide hope for all children and their families. When we build a public school, we build castles of hope and raise a fortress for our democracy. And this building is built by the people of Corvallis for its children, for today, tomorrow, and for generations to follow. In this castle of hope, the doors are open for every child. They are built with the promise that no one should go hungry, no one to live in fear. And no matter who you are or your parents are, this is your castle. It was built for you. Inside it, you find refuge from fear and worries and a place to learn, explore, and imagine. This school is built with the appreciation and acknowledgement of those who were on this land before us, designed with an understanding of the needs of the community and planet, and the promise for every generation to have a better opportunity than the one that's preceded it. To that idea and promise, I want to express my deep appreciation to everybody in this room specifically, and also for the voters, the community, and for their essential role of making this building happen, and every building that we're making better and safer. May this building be blessed by the people who occupy it. May every moment spent within its walls empower our children to observe, understand, reflect, empathize, and dream. Thank you for doing the work.
Thank you, Sammy.
I'm like, oh gosh, now I have to follow Sammy's awesome stuff. I know you did write it ahead of time. Okay, it's cool. It's cool. I just wanted to, you actually threw my whole, I should have wrote notes. I was so into your story, I forgot what I was going to say. But I did, I know what it was. I'm really excited about this tech setup. I can't get over it, how accessible the meetings are right now. And I just wanted to say thank you for the commitment to make these meetings accessible to the community. I remember when I first started on the board, people were asking if we can have some sort of streaming, and we're like, oh, I don't know. And then now here we are, a couple years later. So I'm excited for the community to have more access, because I know everybody can't come in person or watch them live, but they can watch the recordings, and I'm glad to see the commitment to that continuing forward in a very much more streamlined way than we have been doing, even though it worked for us. So thanks for that support. And that was pretty much what I was going to say.
Awesome.
Anyone else? Okay, Lou.
I remember my other thing, thank you. And I even drank coffee, so I still forgot. I was so into the story. I just really hope that the community takes the opportunity to engage with us this year, and we do have our meetings, we have our emails, we're super accessible, and I hope we hear from the community this upcoming year on topics that are important to them, concerns they have, things they appreciate. We like hearing that too, just throwing that out there, and we hope to engage with you more this year.
Yes, what Lou said. And the next time we have a board retreat coming up, but the next time we meet for a board meeting in this spot, school will have started. And so I just want to wish everyone good luck with getting everything done. You're reading the bond report. There's so much. And I was just like, wow, these people are amazing. But thank you for everything that's been done over the summer. Good luck for getting all our kiddos back in school. I'm a mom looking forward to school starting again. So I look forward to hearing how those first few days go in what is going to seem like a normal start to the school year for the first time in a while. So.
And if you have your CDL, consider driving a bus.
Yeah, so good luck to everyone getting ready for the school year. Kiddos who are watching this board meeting, there are none of you. Enjoy your last few weeks of summer. Parents, hang in there. And we will be back in September.
We'll be back the second day of school.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So, okay. So with that, we are adjourned.